Salutations Rangers, General Bradley 101 back again with some more lore. And today's video, boys and girls, in honor of that beautiful, glorious, amazing, brand new knight, look at that beautiful bastard, we're going to be covering every single knight type explained. Both the canon, obsolete, and not so canon, really, it's kind of a little weird. But with everything in Warhammer 40k, if it's not weird, it's really 40k, the answer being no. So strap on in, buckle up, and let's get crackin' on with today's big Stampy robot video. Also, all I was saying that the new knight looks mid? Nah, y'all are just wrong. It is a knight. A knight by default looks epic, therefore another flavor of knight also looks epic. Also, its helmet looks like a Corinthian, so shut. So, how are we going to cover all these knights? Basically, every variant of knight is just a flavor of the base pattern. So we're going to be talking about the base pattern and then go over all the various different known variants in not so super detail. Because basically, it's the same thing with just different weapons, but the weapons are cool, so we're going to talk about them. But first thing first, we're going to talk about some obsolete knight armors. These are certain patterns of knight that just don't exist anymore. That particularly being the Knight Baron and the Knight Lancer. The Knight Baron is odd because it kinda does exist, but not really known as Baron. Previously, the Knight Baron was simply just known as a unique type of knight suit, i.e. customized for the specific role of an elite or veteran knight. Or that's what it's used to refer to nowadays if the title is ever used, but now it's more used to refer to as a catch-all term for a unique set of knight armor, rather than a particular type. As back in the day, it was used to lead a group of knight lancers. Thusly, it was armed with a battle cannon and a power lance. It was essentially this hybrid type between the Questoris and the Castigator. It was essentially this weird hybridization between the Questoris pattern and the Cerastus pattern. Also, there's no images for them, either canon or fan art. But these were either the proto versions of the Cerastus or they were a unique combination of the two, we don't really know. But they're obsolete. And they were armed with a battle cannon and a power lance. Essentially, these were, as the name suggests, the cavalry sort of. These were meant to flank around the enemy forces and hit them hard. But again, these were rendered obsolete as more unique patterns became developed, and these essentially fell to the wayside. Though the term Knight Baron does still indeed exist, referring to a specialized unique suit of knight armor. But from knight armors that are obsolete to knight armors that kinda should be obsolete, we then have the Centurion and the Praetorian. The Centurion and the Praetorian have basically no information about them whatsoever. I mean, they literally come from one page out of an old 40k book, so yeah, they really don't need to exist. Also, no art for these guys as well. But Praetorian Knights are essentially a Questoris pattern, as they are armed with either a battle cannon, autocannon, or multi-melter in the form of the Knight Saber, Knight Scimitar, or the Knight Claymore, and they all have Imperial Shock Lances. Again, these are basically a form of Questoris, but I mean, it doesn't really say anything at all about them. And as for the Centurions, this is essentially like Armigers or like heavier Armigers or lighter knights. They're essentially armed with heavy weapons that are set meant to deal with infantry, so I lean towards more like Armigers. And their whole idea, their whole shtick, is that they're supposed to run up in the flanks and deal with any enemies that are trying to outflank the bigger Knight Praetorians or get into the rear of the enemy. And that's pretty much all there is on them. Yeah, no, these guys just exist for one page. But speaking of the Armigers, let's talk about these boys. See, the Armigers are the first type of knight that we talk about that actually has something to talk about them. And these are more so the men-at-arms to the actual knights. Whereas the Questoris is very much so the main knight guy. These Armigers are usually piloted not by actually members of the knight house, but rather by men-at-arms. Men-at-arms is the colloquial term for people serving these knight houses, i.e. the Imperial Guard or, quote-unquote Imperial Guard adjacent or substitutes that are supposed to be, though usually speaking, modern knight worlds, i.e. knight worlds that have embraced technology as opposed to feudal knight worlds which have not, generally speaking have higher quality and better training than the standard Imperial Guard. But the closest retainers to an Imperial Knighthold house and the most senior and veteran of those Imperial Guard, aka men-at-arms, they gain access to join in these Armiger suits. These are the lightest, the smallest, but most importantly, they're the most numerous, and again, they form the foot soldiers. The idea behind this is that you have the main chunky knight who does what he needs to do, who takes up the main enemy fortification, the main enemy knight, whatever it may be. But the Armigers, they're designed to flank around and either hit the enemy's rear, but more particularly to guard the flanks of the available knights. As you can imagine, something like a knight is very big and very chunky, very powerful, but also very vulnerable. Not only to other knights, but more particularly hidden anti-armor assets. Things like heavy-duty anti-tank cannons or anti-tank rounds, traps, whatever it may be, hidden infantry, armor. Basically, these things are ambush predators and they are very deadly to a knight. The job of the Armiger is to scout around, to hit in the nitty-gritty, to find these bastards before they find the big knight and prevent him from getting sniped before he can get his kill streak. Thusly, generally speaking, they're armed with lighter weapons, but they can indeed be armed and equipped with more heavier duty versions. So, there are two main types that are really common in modern day 40k, that being the Helverin and the Warglaive. But then there's also the Knight Morax that's a little more common in 30k. Speaking of the Knight Morax, the Knight Morax is very much a small armiger. It is armed and equipped with a unique type of shock lance, but more particularly either a conversion beamer or a heavy-duty melter gun. So the Knight Morax is again designed particularly to get up close and personal with other knights. In fact, it's meant to be a screening force. That shock lance pretty good against other enemy knights, and of course big chunky melter or conversion beamer, yeah, that'll do a thing or two against enemy armor. We then have the Knight Warglaive. The Knight Warglaive is essentially the modern day 40k version of the Knight Morax, as it's armed with a Reaper chainsword and thermal spears, again aka big chunky melter, and it's kind of taken over the same role as the Knight Morax. Again, it's very similar to the Knight Morax, except it's more modern, quote unquote, which actually means that it's less advanced, but semantics. But this thing is meant to work in conjunction with the Knight Helverin to deal with all types of foes. This thing is meant to get up close and personal into the big chunky boys and really give them the sticker. But what about all those other small annoying infantry, you may ask? Well, that's why we have the Knight Helverin. The Knight Helverin is armed with Helverin autocannons. These two monstrous behemoths will turn any type of infantry into paste. And by infantry, I mean anything that's basically smaller than another Helverin. You can also take a pinto mount, usually in the form of heavy stubber, or if you wanted to have a bit more bite against enemy armor, melter guns. And that's pretty much all of the armigers that we have to cover. As I said, much more common than generally speaking any other knight variant, but they're meant to support the bigger knights. They're the men-at-arms meant to support his lord in a lance. But what exactly are those lords? Well, that's when we get to the mainstay of Imperial Knights, the Knights. When you think of a knight, you think about these guys, that being the Questoris pattern. And there is no knight more knightly than, of course, the Knight Paladin. The Knight Paladin is essentially what the Questoris line is supposed to be. Armed with a rapid-fire battle cannon and a heavy stubber, as well as a melee arm, which generally speaking is a Reaper chainsword, but technically could be anything else. The Knight Paladin represents what Imperial Knights are supposed to be. Moving, walking fortresses. Able to deliver intense, devastating, high-powered armored rounds that can rend tank columns asunder, but also having enough melee physicality and capability to render the enemy's mightiest fortifications into dust. The Knight Paladin truly is the greatest creation of Imperial architecture, as unlike the Titans of the Adeptus Mechanicus, if you lose one, you don't have an entire planet mourning for a day. Granted, losing a knight still is a big thing, but it's not nearly as a massive sink of investment and time into it as, say, a Titan. Even something as small as a Warhound has significantly more time and investment in both material and manpower than one single knight. And in some cases, a knight can do the job of a Warhound pretty well. But moreover than the sheer martial prowess that a knight represents, it's also what a knight represents to the people around it. Whereas a Titan is a god engine meant to gawk at, a Paladin is something meant to aspire to. Seeing a knight wading through your lines, banners bearing, horns aloud, and to see men-at-arms trundle along past it in armigers and other chimeras, you see that the knights are meant to be a symbol of the might of the Imperium, not the might of the machine god, but of the men and women, the truest and most noblest sons of the house of the Imperium. And god damn it, does it just look cool! The Knight Paladin is one of the most iconic things in all of 40k, that big giant Reaper chainsword and that massive cannon, it's just mwah. But whereas that's its main armament, that's not its only armament. As I mentioned, it does have a heavy stubber in the actual mount of the cannon itself, but it also has another heavy stubber mounted in a ball turret, usually on the left-hand side. You can also take a pinto mount, which can either be an Icarus Stormpod or Icarus to an autocannon. And that in of itself is super simple. One is anti-horde / anti-air, the other is anti-armor, or anti-horde as well, depends on what missiles you load in it. But from one of the oldest and most classic boys, we go on to the newest kid on the block, and again, I love this guy, bro, the Knight Defender. The Knight Defender is armed with a Plasma Executioner and a Conversion Beam Obliterator. You guys know what a plasma gun is? Who doesn't love the power of the sun in the palm of your hand? But then we also have the Conversion Beamer. Conversion Beamers are a relatively newly discovered weapon for the Imperium, or rediscovered I should say. As the name implies, it fires a giant beam of energy that scorches the way around it. It's kind of like a heat ray / death ray, very similar to a Volkite, but not really. It's interesting, it's pretty high-tech and sci-fi, and it's really nice to see. Just looking at the design, it really does show you that classic old sci-fi tech. But the Knight Defender's claim to fame is the fact that it is indeed a defender, because it has a powerful shield generator on it. Specifically a void shield generator. Knights, generally speaking, have plasma reactors, and those plasma reactors power ion shields, which are basically a smaller version of void shields. But the Knight Defender has a full-on void shield package in it, making it incredibly difficult to take down. And what's most notable of this Knight is that it is said to lend this shielding power unto others, meaning that as its name implies, it's a defender. as all knights should. But whereas defending your folks is pretty cool, the Imperium was founded upon a crusade. And there is none more crusader than the Knight Crusader. The Knight Crusader is armed with usually a carapace-mounted Icarus storm pod, but more particularly two main arms in the forms of ranged weapons. Usually a macro Gatling cannon and a rapid-fire battle cannon. But not always. If it has a gun, it can go on it. As the name implies, the Knight Crusader is meant to go on and crusade. It is meant to spearhead the attack, laying waste to the enemy in a voracious torrent of fire that makes them question if God alive is real, because the machine god certainly is, and he is sick and tired of your shit. Honestly, it's a crusader, love the name, and who doesn't like Darker the Knight, bro? Big chunky firepower knight. Very good. But if you crave the glory of melee combat which the Emperor hath so rightly prescribed, we then have the Knight Gallant. The Knight Gallant is basically the opposite of the Crusader, but same different. It's also meant to spearhead enemy assaults, smashing through the opponent like an angry god of war. But instead of wielding two twin big Daka shooters, this thing has two big giant swords, or a big fist and a sword, as it is usually armed with a Reaper chainsword and a Thunderstrike gauntlet. This thing's going to cut you up, and what it can't cut up is going to turn into paste by a big punch. Also, a particular note of the Thunderstrike gauntlet, it literally is just a giant fuck off power fist, and this thing is incredibly deadly against other Titan class vehicles. Because of the nature of power fists and the way they operate, this thing can absolutely decimate any and all other vehicles its size, meaning that Knight Gallants will often go up and hunting against other enemy forces. As its name implies, Gallants are supposed to be gallant. They will often seek and oppose enemy combatants on the field, and are often the champions of specific Knight worlds. But where about the Knight Gallant is all about fanfare and fighting the enemy champion and ensuring that his house comes on top. If you have a monster, or a big giant amalgamation of orcish steel and might in the honor of Gorka Morka himself, then you're gonna want the Knight Errant. As the Knight Errant has a melee arm, which usually is that big chunky Thunderstrike gauntlet, but more particularly a thermal cannon, aka Melter Gun from Hell. Cause that orcish monstrosity may be big and chunky, but there are very few things that say I'd like to tear open metal like a fucking can opener, like a Melter Gun the size of a Lehman Russ, and a Thunderstrike gauntlet that would make even Fulgrim blush. The Knight Errant, like its name says, is on an errant quest to kill whatever comes its way. It is indeed the tip of the very spear, going for the dangerous foe and destroying the enemy. But if you want something that's a bit more defensive oriented and meant to protect the backline, we then have the Knight Warden. The Knight Warden is armed with an Avenger Gatling cannon that has an underslung heavy flamer as well as a melee arm, usually a Ooh, God. We're talking about the Imperium, not the Dark Elder here, my boy. Usually a Reaper chainsword. As its name implies, the Knight Warden is meant to ward its defense. It's meant to operate in the sort of rear to midline. With that heavy-duty Gatling cannon and heavy flamer, it's meant to guard the flanks of enemy opponents. Basically, anything that manages to slip through the armatures, this guy is meant to take care of. That heavy Gatling cannon will absolutely demolish armor columns. Not to mention, if anything heavy infantry-based like Space Marines or Terminators get up to it, a combination of a heavy flamer as well as a melee arm will absolutely wreck shop. Again, Knight Wardens, as the name implies, are meant to guard their brothers. Because while everyone else is rushing to the foe and destroying them utterly, leave it to the noble Knight Warden to keep you safe. For their glory is not won by themselves, but it is won for the entire house to share. But from the noble Knight Warden to something a little bit more destructive, we then have the Knight Styrics. The Knight Styrics have a melee arm, which consists of either a Reaper Chainsword or a Hecatonk Siege Claw. The Hecatonk Siege Claw is a version of the Thunderstrike Gauntlet, but again, kinda like a Lightning Claw is to a Power Fist. As its name implies, it's meant to break siege walls, and is a claw. But what's really nasty about this guy is that it indeed has 3 main weapons rather than the usual 2 that we think of. That Hecatonk Siege Claw has twin rad cleansers. Yes, this thing does nuclear damage, but it also has a massive Volkite Charavel. Volkite is pretty okay against armor, but where it really shines is against organic material, as when it strikes organic material, it will cause it to combust and implode, in a phenomenon known as deflagration. And yes, that is just as nasty as it sounds. But if you manage to survive all of that, the big chunk and claw, the Volkite turning your flesh into pulp, and of course the radiation, in its chest it has a Graviton Crusher. Gravity weapon that gets up close and personal and gives you the worst bear hug of your life. The Knight Styrics is a very uncommon form of knight for the sole fact that it is pretty nasty. And again, knights are all about nobility and honor, but this thing is designed for pure wanton slaughter. That's not me saying it, that's according to the knights themselves. So a less seen but a little bit more acceptable version of the Knight Styrax is its brother, the Knight Megara. Now these are designed as close combat shock assault units. As I mentioned before, they have a Reaper Chainsword or a Hecaton Siege Claw, also this time nuclear powered, but more specifically it has a lightning cannon. This is a larger version of the arc weaponry used by Skitarii, and it's a giant lightning gun, kind of like a PPC from Battletech. And in its chest, of course, it has a plasma fusel, because when in doubt, apply plasma until the situation goes away, or the bastard is burnt to death, or you explode, whichever comes first. It's important to note, however, that these two units, that being the Knight Megara and the Knight Styrax, are very much so closely related to the Mechanicus rather than Imperial Knight households. As again, if you don't know, Knight houses can briefly be divided into two main allegiances. Those that are Imperial houses, aka loyal to the Emperor, and those that are Mechanicus houses, aka loyal to the Mechanicum. Basically, it was something that's decided in the Treaty of Olympus that Knight houses can choose who they want to serve. Hence why these two are kinda a bit more fucked up than the others. And, ladies and gentlemen, that lines up with the Questoris pattern. Those are the knights. These are the knights that you're most likely going to see and the ones that you're most likely going to buy. And the Knight Defender is a perfect addition to this. Because whilst there are some people who claim that it's mid, which you are objectively wrong by the way, it does add a very nice niche into the wider diaspora of the Knight Questoris, as we actually have a knight that's purely meant to defend, being the first of its kind. So that is really nice and I do enjoy it. And he's a welcome addition to this Hallowed family. But from the mainstay of the knights to some of the most oldest of knights, we then have the Knight Cerastus. The Knight Cerastus is pretty interesting, as unlike the Knight Questoris, originally knights were created from the main suits of industry that were actually carried by colony ships. They didn't start out as military units, but rather they were units that started out as these construction bots, essentially mining robots, and they were transformed into these suits of war. The Cerastus breaks that pattern, as it said that this was created in the Age of Strife specifically, but for one very important reason, as conquerors. You notice that these are incredibly fast moving, they're incredibly heavily armored, and you'll also notice that these guys are designed with destruction at the forefront. Well, all of them but one, but we'll talk a little about that in a minute. First up, we have the Knight Acheron. The Knight Acheron is essentially the super edgy grimdark cousin of the entire Cerastus family, and that's saying a lot, because it is armed with a Reaper Chain Fist, which have underslung two heavy bolters, as well as an Acheron pattern flame cannon, aka Flamer from Hell. Like all Cerastus units, they move incredibly fast, but these guys were specifically designed as extermination weapons. These guys were deployed either to exterminate a fortress with those heavy flamers, or more specifically and more terribly, they were set to exterminate and eradicate the remnant populations. They were mop-up forces, meant to kill both military and civilian personnel alike, as these were mostly used by traitor units. And it's said that of all the machine spirits of the Knight Cerastus, these guys are the most bloodthirsty and evil. And yeah, taking a look at that thing, it definitely looks like an evil knight. But on the more neutral side of this 40k alignment chart, we then have the Knight Atropos. Again, what's interesting about the Knight Atropos is that it was initially created to destroy Xeno war machines, as it is armed with an Atropos Lascutter as well as a Graviton Singularity Cannon, these two weapons being incredibly efficient at destroying enemy armor. The Lascutter is meant to punch through any shields or armor, and of course the Singularity Cannon is meant to get into all that juicy bits underneath. Interestingly about this, while most of the Knight Acherons went towards the Tracer side, most of the Knight Atropos leaned more towards the Loyalist side, particularly the Loyalist forces used by the Mechanicum. As whilst these were initially created to destroy Xenos war machines, when the Heresy came, they became dedicated to being anti-armor agents. It is said that everything that happened, the machine spirit of these knights is so incredibly cold and all-destroying, as it lusts to destroy these abominations that are beholden unto the machine god, both heretic and Xenos alike, that the chaps who bomb them have to be careful, if not they'll be driven mad with its killing lust. Again, it really does make sense you have two sides of the same coin with these knights. Whereas one is all about terrible, wretched, and evil destruction, the other one is all about destruction, but much more cold and calculating, yet still pretty terrible. So if that's the chaotic neutral, we then lean more towards the lawful neutral, or the good chaotic, depending on how you want to call it, as we talk about the Knight Castigator. The Knight Castigator has a Tempest Warblade, essentially a power sword but knight-sized, and has a massive Castigator bolt cannon. Yes, the same bolt cannon that goes on the Warhound. What's interesting about this knight is that it's kind of at odds with itself, because younger pilots are quite drawn to this because of the big heckin' chunk and firepower that it has, but its role on the battlefield and its machine spirit are very defensive in nature. The role of the Castigator is to be on the flanks and to ward off enemy units. You are by definition not meant to be in the thick of it and seek glory. You are meant to do what needs to be done so that your fellows can seek glory. Something which is very abhorred by young scions. They want to get glory, they want to get a name for themselves, they want to show how awesome they are in force of arms. Its machine spirit as well, it's known for being very stoic. It's one of those things that it's very hard to rouse this machine spirit into rage. The machine spirit will urge its pilots to do its duty and its duty alone, so it won't let you slack in protecting its buddies, but at the same time, it won't let you charge forward. But it has been recorded that on the rare occasions that a Knight Castigator gets its dander up, this giant stoic turns into a monstrous foe full of wrath and rage. And that Castigator bolt cannon sure does do some castigating, and I'll tell you what. We then come to the most iconic type of Cerastus Knight, and the one that is most beloved by the community as well as in-universe, that being the Knight Lancer. And we are now firmly in the lawful good territory. Whereas people claim that the Cerastus pattern of Knight as a whole was designed to kill, destroy, and enslave, the Knight Lancer is the one thing from stopping scholars to claim that as fact, because it is armed with a Cerastus shock lance, but particularly an iron gauntlet shield. Now this is a separate shield system dedicated purely to housing the shield matrix on the arm, meaning that it can work in conjunction with the own iron shields generated by the Knight's plasma reactor. And again, what's interesting about this Knight is that it said that its machine spirit is said to be very noble in nature, despite being very temperamental and just unable to sit still. This thing wants to go, it wants to hit hard, it wants to punch, it wants to fight. Because of this, it is known for being the personal right of the most glory-hungry and impetuous Knight households. But here's the kicker. There are very few of these, as one, they are indeed rare, but more particularly, very few Knights can actually successfully bond with it. Because whilst the Knight Lancer is all about glory and power, it's also about duty and nobility. So if you get a Knight Scion who's a little more dishonorable while glory seeking, the Knight Lancer isn't going to have any of it. But if you find that hot-headed, glory-hungry Knight who still loves and appreciates and honors his buddies, the Knight Lancer is the perfect mount. And there's a reason why they are some of the most beloved knights by loyalists and some of the most feared by traitors. Looking at the Knight Cerastus, it really is just an awesome, amazing unit, and I do love the various different aspects that we get with it. While yes, originally it was created specifically as weapons of war, as we go through each different type of them, we see that they get progressively better. You start with the Acheron, that's like evil on the alignment chart. They get the Knight Lancer, which is like chaotic good. Of course, it's not a perfect comparison, but it's pretty funny. Looking at them, they have a really good feel, and I do like that the Knight Lancer is the quote-unquote most loved and the goodest of the guys, because just look at it. It looks gorgeous. But all in all, the Knight Cerastus is the perfect accompaniment to the Knight Questoris. As well, the Knight Questoris is your baseline if you want something a little bit more edgy or a little bit more noble, and certainly full of power and glory. Take a look at the Knight Cerastus. But from the oldest to the absolute biggest, we then come to the Knight Dominus. So, the Knight Paladin was always like a favorite knight of mine, but a really close second is the Knight Castellan. Of course, now you have the Knight Defender that's joined in and made it a 3-horse race. But the Dominus is the heavy knight, and it is the second biggest type of knight. The Acastus being the most big, we'll get to that a little later. These are essentially the showpiece unit of any particular knight house. It's very rare to have a knight house have more than maybe 2 of these. But, like their name implies, they are meant to dominate the battlefield. They are the final say, and whenever they are, wherever they go, they give the largest and biggest boom. And they come in 2 flavors, ranged and melee. The Knight Castellan. The Knight Castellan is your ranged variant that is designed purely for turning any and all mental monstrosity into slag. And again, it's very noticeable because it is the first ever knight that is purely dedicated for anti-titan roles, as it is armed with the destructive Volcano Lance. The Volcano Lance is an anti-titan weapon. It's the same thing that the Shadow Sword has, and it can absolutely decimate a titan. Granted, Warhound Titan, but when you consider that knights operate in lances, there are accounts of Dominuses fighting things as big as warlords. And when you combine it with its plasma decimator, yeah, this thing can definitely fuck up a Warhound. But that's not it, as it has twin Siegebreaker missile systems as well as twin Siegebreaker cannons, in addition to twin melter guns, because why not? The Knight Dominus is definitely one of those units that it is meant to fight off an army, and it can. But whereas the Castellan is meant to fight more of an army of one, if you want to fight an army of many, then the Knight Valiant is what you want, baby. Because it is armed with a conflagration cannon, aka Flamer from Hell, a triple-barreled, heavy-duty, ultra-super heavy flamer that can destroy basically anything into liquid slag, including battle tanks. And God forbid there's any infantry showing up, be they Space Marine, Terminator, or Guardsmen, because as I said, Shieldbreaker missiles, Siegebreaker cannons, and twin melter guns, baby. But if you're a big chunky bastard and you think you can throw hands with this dude in melee, I would highly recommend against it, because this guy is armed with a Thunder Coil Harpoon, which is literally a big fucking spear mounted with a grapply thing and just pew! new strike, pow, bang, power spear, harpoon thing. It's wild. Look at this thing, it's fucking brilliant. I love this thing, dude. And those are the two classes of the Knight Dominus. As I said before, they are the masters of all the knights, having the most devastating melee weapon and the most devastating range weapon in either configuration. But basically, if you want something big, you want something chunky, and you want something that will kill whatever you sick it on, the Knight Dominus is your boy. But whereas the Knight Dominus may be the master, it's certainly not the god of the battlefield. Because whilst many have called it a Titan Knight, it is not the true Titan Knight. For that, we have to talk about the Acastus pattern. The Acastus pattern are the biggest classification of knights, because they are quite literally the size of a Warhound Titan. They are indeed Titan Knights, or Knight Titans, however you want to call them. Again, very, very, very rare, usually aligned with the Mechanicum, and more common in 30k than 40k. Basically, it's thought of that in 40k itself, none of them exist, but you know, there's a possibility that you could have one or two lying around somewhere. Maybe. But again, highly unlikely. And it comes in two flavors. First is the Knight Asterius. It is armed with a pair of twin conversion beam cannons. Yes, two of those. Massive heckin' chonkers. But to deal with any types of infantry, it has two Volkite culverins, which are essentially Volkites but for Leman Russes, and of course, a Kakaros mortar battery mounted on its back. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Knight Titan, or the Titan Knight, made for sieges. This thing is a devastating monster. As I said before, this thing is meant to walk up to enemy fortifications and annihilate them wholesale. Its sheer size, weight, and bulk means that nothing can even come close to comparing it other than a Titan itself. But if what you're facing isn't a fortress, but more likely a fortress on legs, then we have the Knight Porphyrion. The Knight Porphyrion is armed with two twin-linked Magna las cannons. Again, Titan-grade weapons. And for its carapace, it can either have multiple Ironstorm missile pods or Helios defense missiles. Again, the difference is in the name, one is offensive, one is defensive. And then finally, it rounds it out with either a pair of autocannons, even more las cannons, or if you want a bit more of nuke in your life, rad cleansers. These are some of the most destructive units that a Knight House can possess, but they're also some of the rarest and thus some of the most prized. As you'll notice, this is the first Knight configuration that we've seen that doesn't have a melee version. These guys are big, they are chunky, and they are meant to sit in the backline and pour down fire. I mean, we have accounts of basically entire Knight Houses giving up almost every single war machine they have, purely just to save one of these guys. That is how rare and amazing they are. Because again, whilst they're indeed Titan size and they have the power of a Titan, they don't cost as much, and they're indeed very much different from it. Again, we don't really know much about them or how they're created, but we do know that they're rare, and that they're powerful, and again, very prized by all those around them. Also, the idea of a Titan Knight is just, so good. So good. So, that is all of the Loyalist Knights, and you may be wondering, Brad, what about the Chaos Knights? Well, the Chaos Knights are literally just Loyalist Knights, but more spiky. And that is true for every single version of a Knight, except for one. And this is a favorite of everyone, be you Loyalist or Heretic alike. Because to end off this video, we're going to be talking about the Knight Abominant. The Knight Abominant is the first ever true Chaos Knight. As I mentioned before, Chaos Knights were basically just Imperial Knights but more spiky, but this is the first ever solely Chaos Knight. As to what Questoris pattern this used to be, we don't, as again, there are no Questoris patterns that have this main Volkite combustor as its primary weapon. But whatever it was, no one cares, because what it is fucking sick. This is a combination of a demon engine and a knight. As I mentioned before, it is armed with a Volkite combustor, again big, chunky Volkite gun. In addition, it has a heavy stubber mounted on its chassis. But when it comes to melee, that's when it really shines, because it has a Bale Mace, which is essentially a fucking tail. Yes, as I said, demon engine, and Electro Scourge tentacles, as one of its arms has literally become 3 tentacle-like constructs that can both wrap around and crush the foe, or stab them with pinpoint devastating accuracy. But what truly makes this knight different is that it has been blessed by the Dark Gods, more specifically by the infusion of warp energy. As it turns out, either it is the machine spirit within it that has become a demon, or the Scion itself has become a Psyker, because this bastard can cast Smite. This has a unique type of psychic discipline known as the Warp Storm, and this thing is just maddening. It is said that when this guy descends, black rain will begin to fall from the sky as the warp itself will become part of the universe that it resides in, as storms throw around it, vortexes of terror open up, demons spurt open. It is just wild. Also, it's said that this thing can sing, or it can conjure the ability to sing. With spectral, ghostly energy surging through it, it will unleash a banshee-like howl to devastate the foe around it. To all the Chaos Knight boys, y'all had to wait a long time for this bastard, but this guy deserves the prominent title of being a Chaos Knight. Also, he just looks so cool. Look at him, man. He looks so fucking great. Mwah. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for watching. I do hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know down below, which is your favorite knight? As I said, mine, Knight Paladin, but the Knight Defender is really close second, and of course, love me Knight Castellan, simple as. Well, which one is your favorite knight? What do you guys think about the Knight Abominant? What other type of Chaos Knight would you guys add? Do you think they deserve more? I think maybe 1 or 2 more personally, but as it stands, the Knight Abominant is a really great addition. But I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for watching, and even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Also, shout out to brand new member, Rambling Hamster, who joined at the corporal tier. Welcome to you, my dear beloved fellow. Thank you for joining this corps, and I do hope you enjoyed today's video about knights. Big shout out to my officer corps with Mr. Eddie V3, Mr. Major of the Void. Shout out to my sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Warsmith Fireheart, Mr. Corns Butcher, Mr. Bulwin, Mr. Sean IRL7, and Matthew Merrill. Big shout out to my corporal tier members, Tremail the Math Kitty, Mr. Lord Rosarius, Mr. Tech Priest Toaster, and Shauna Smithers. And finally, but certainly not least, massive thank you to my privateer members, Mr. Thomas Moslons, Mr. Ivan_SVW, Mr. Hotori's Curse, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Hayeda, Mr. Diego Castro, CMD Nay, Mr. Fortus Unum, and Mr. Gentle Salamander. Thank you, each and every one of you. I love you, I appreciate you. You guys make all this happen. The love that I've gotten on the recent videos has been more than outstanding, and I will always love and appreciate each and every one of you. You guys are bloody brilliant. God, you guys are great. Mwah. But before I go today, I want to let you guys know I have a brand new Star Wars channel known as the 101st Archive. Me and a couple friends of mine have joined, we made this channel together, and it's something really great, it's really different. It's a little different to the 40k channel, but if you guys like Star Wars, go and check it out. We have a couple shorts and we have a long form video there. You can expect 1 long form a week, and go and check out our main video right now about Darth Vader and why he is the perfect nightmare. But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, amazing people. Thank y'all also very much for watching. Y'all must stay noble out there, boys and gals. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. I can't believe people are like, bro, the knight is mid. Bro, you're mid.